Thanks, David, and thanks, APSI, for this invitation to talk today. Thank you for giving me the slot just before lunch and also now just before elbow, so I'll try to be quick and keep to the agenda. Today I'm going to talk about what the Bus Association has been doing, working with our members to look through the current environment of disruption within the personal transport space and to identify strategic direction and a commercial platform to assist our members transitioning from bus operators to total transport operators. My presentation today is going to talk about the concept of disruption, demand responsive transport and how it affects and aligns with public transport, the policy and regulatory environment in Victoria around demand responsive transport and how that's going to influence business opportunities, what the industry has been doing to provide a solution in this space, and what we need to do as an industry to make sure the agenda, especially in Victoria, is not diverted by government inaction and the political cycles. Okay. Can we get... Sorry, Michael. Okay, thank you. Okay. So everyone's been talking about disruption these last couple of days. Everyone's given some good snapshots of where the government is going, where the operators are going, where the software suppliers are going and how demand responsive transport can interact and work with public transport. To me, I see disruption as an evolution in transport, both in public space and in the private space. And it's being led by the tools that are currently available today and what's going to come to us in the future. As has been presented here, transport's evolving away from a purely supply side function to a customer-led demand function. People want to travel when they want, where they want, and how they want. Our phones, everyone's got a mobile phone these days. They make customers' decisions, or allow customers to make the decisions instantly there on the spot. We don't have to worry about planning too far in advance. The bus industry and government, we need to understand this and acknowledge this and figure out a way forward because our current method of supplying public transport for everyone using that supply-driven methodology won't be acceptable moving forward, and we need to consider the needs of every customer when we are making these decisions. So how do DRT and public transport compare? We've had this conversation in the last couple of days. Public transport is a heavily regulated and subsidised industry, and it's basically at the control of state governments. The public transport network is designed to move large volumes of people for very short periods of time, basically AM and PM peaks. Outside of these peak periods, service levels on public transport drop off dramatically, especially on the bus network. The network is efficient at moving high volumes of people because of the fixed routes, fixed timetables and fixed low-cost fares. It's designed to move people into and out of CBDs to get people into and out of work. It doesn't have that cross-town functionality. Government regulates service provision through long-term contracts with just a few operators bound to meet strict service obligations, both operationally and as well in terms of service costs. Governments love to know how much they're spending down to the cent for each service kilometre that goes out there. In addition to its commuter function, public transport also provides that social safety net to the community, especially for those members of the community like school children, the aged and people with limited mobility who can't travel any other way. And this social safety aspect is quite critical for what we are doing as a bus association especially within Melbourne's outer growth corridors and in regional Victoria. Now, for demand responsive transport, everyone's talking about it here so far. It's designed around the individual's needs. Services are limited to just a few passengers. Supply responds to the customer's needs and charges the customer accordingly. Fares are dependent on the time of day and the distance travelled by the customer. And typically, the demand for DRT services occurs outside of those peak public transport services. So where do these services overlap? Where I believe DRT and public transport can work well together, actually complement each other, includes the last mile, first mile access to mass transit services. In Melbourne, it's the outer suburbs, especially in those new estates where you're putting on a regular, efficient bus service, full route bus services, is not cost effective. And it usually ends up being a low meandering service which encourages people to drive to the train station. Those other areas are in Melbourne there's a lot of geographically constrained areas, and the same sort of thing, you have low meandering services which don't attract people to the service. And in regional Victoria, same thing, you have services that run every 60 minutes in most of the larger towns, which is not really appropriate for those members of the community. You could also use DRT to supplement those parts of the existing public transport network that are overburdened, and you could also introduce personalised shuttle services, some of the trials that are currently going on in New South Wales. In the end, how DRT and public transport work together will be driven mostly by the customer and how much they are willing to pay for the service. We need to be able to present a platform to the customer to allow them to choose the solution that best meets all of their needs. Oops. I apologise, I skipped one there. On the right one, yep. So this is where policy and regulation come into play. The level of support of government for customers and industry will dictate how this all unfolds. One of the big problems influencing the debate in Victoria on DRT and public transport is a lack of direction from state government. In Victoria, we don't actually have a public transport strategy, and because of that, we don't actually have a policy or strategy on demand responsive transport. What we do have, as a result of the Uberisation of on-demand transport, we have a new commercial passenger vehicle legislation that was introduced in July this year. And this particular legislation will influence how DRT integrates with public transport. It sets out the roles and responsibilities of the various parties involved in the provision of commercial passenger services. And it's actually quite a good legislation because it provides some opportunities for the bus sector within a demand responsive transport space. And so overall, when we're considering how we're going to integrate demand responsive transport with public transport, we need to understand the different legislation that governs the operation of both different platforms, because they are different legislations within Victoria. And we need to consider how these can work in partnership, the different regulators and bureaucrats that are involved in implementing these regulations, and how that's going to affect the current commercial contractual obligations of bus service providers in the state. So, however, within Victoria, the public service, their unstructured thinking around demand responsive transport has evolved somewhat from providing taxi services in regional Victorias and pretending they're buses, to now start to think that we can replace bus services in regional Victoria with Uber services. They like that logic because there's no need for investment in infrastructure by government that way. The risk transfers from the government to industry, and the service moves from the government having to subsidise something to a user pay system. Now, it's been mentioned here today and yesterday that demand responsive transport is a lot more expensive per service kilometre and per passenger kilometre than public transport. And this even occurs when you consider the level of subsidy the government currently gives to public transport. The key is to determine the best method of integrating these two forms together to develop the most effective overall service for the community, as well as providing the most efficient price and risk profile back to government. If we can't agree a formal policy or strategy on how DRT services should operate in Victoria, then there is potential for an uncoordinated, profit-driven corporations to influence high-level government decisions in the policy space, which will disadvantage low accessibility and socially isolated Victorians. Caught that one. So why hasn't government and industry embraced this change to date? In short, in Victoria, like other states, public transport is a heavily regulated and extremely political industry. At present, DRT is a priority of the current government, and so in relation to route buses, the way government has delivered public transport services and the effectiveness of these services has enabled the conversation to move from, well, we've disrupted the transport industry with this methodology around shared rides. Well, why can't we do that to the bus industry? We've heard some of the speakers talk about why this can't happen to buses, and I understand that and I sort of agree with it, but as the taxi industry discovered, never say never. Things can change, things can happen, and it's up to the government to make or lead the policy direction in this. So as an industry, we've decided we need to lead the conversation. The government's not doing that in Victoria. Other states seem to be well advanced, but this is not the case in Victoria. So we've collaborated with our members. We've been working on an app-based solution that will assist our members to transition from that bus operator to a total transport provider. We've been working with local communities, local councils, local operators to determine the best transport solutions that can be developed and tailored to meet the needs of the local community. Local bus operators, they have a corporate social responsibility to their communities. Many of our members have been involved in their communities for decades. They've been providing both school bus services and local route services. They understand the community and they work well with the community. Any DRT solution that is identified and developed needs to be a ground-up solution led by the local community. Otherwise, we won't get the necessary buy-in and support to provide a successful outcome. And as has been shown overseas, you tend to have these solutions fail quite quickly. And the agreed solution needs to be a co-investment between industry and all levels of government, federal, state and local government, because there's significant transport funding that goes across all three levels of government that is uncoordinated, and there's quite a lot of duplication and wastage. And so the key thing is the ability to get all stakeholders to the table to develop an integrated transport solution. So what's the commercial opportunity for the bus industry? For BAV members, it's to take advantage of the existing capability of the operators, their local expertise, and to augment current services by providing a range of transport services to the community. In essence, as I've said before, it's becoming total local transport operators rather than just bus operators. We see the next evolution in the provision of transport services as a key platform in ensuring that our members are able to continue to operate their businesses. It's the key thing why we're developing this particular approach. What BAV's been working on is the development of a one-stop integrated transport network that provides a whole of journey solution to customers to meet their access needs across the state. BAV is developing a single customer-focused app interface that enables route planning, journey booking and payment across multiple modes of transport. And here it is, Get There as demand responsive transport. It's an industry-led personal transport solution that has evolved through extensive engagement with stakeholders and operators. It's been in the making for more than 2 years. The system integrates existing public transport services, government subsidised DRT services and unsubsidised DRT services under one platform. It enables operators the opportunity to engage in multiple markets through one fleet and one central IT booking and scheduling service. Get There will have a flexible pricing structure based on service offering to provide transport options to meet access needs for the community in regional areas, in Melbourne's outer fringes, to provide community transport services on behalf of council and not-for-profit organisations, provide tailored services to the health industry and the NDIS, and within a public transport context, provide last mile services to Melbourne's growth corridors. The concept's not new, everyone's been talking about it, and it's been tried on a number of sites globally. This is an opportunity for the bus industry to be leaders of this transition within Australia. BusVic will be commencing Get There trials in early 2019 in regional Victoria in partnership with Warrnambool Bus Lines, and a broader rollout is expected in the second half of 2019. To deliver on this outcome, there are still a number of matters that need to be finalised. Firstly, we need to understand the actual demand for transport needs, not just patronage numbers on public transport, but understanding the overall transport demand within each of the different communities. Our research, in conjunction with Professors John Stanley and Janet Stanley, has shown that there is extensive unmet transport need across the state, not just within the public transport sphere. There is a need to change the paradigm in which regional and peri-urban transport services are provided. We need to create flexible public transport service delivery contracts that empower the operator to focus on service delivery. And to fully benefit from DRT services, it is essential we integrate transport services across all providers, not just public transport. Now, to achieve this, industry and government need to work together to agree on a number of changes on the way we currently provide transport services in Victoria. This includes devolving planning and service delivery to the local level, implementing a single service system for local transport, integrating funding models across all levels of government, introducing a locally responsible decision-making body for transport accessibility, and working with government to help them overcome their obsession of mega transport projects. It won't be an easy transition for industry and government, but there are a lot of people across the industry who are working towards improved outcomes. In this instance, the bus industry sees a need for us to lead the conversation in order to ensure that the government is not overcome by the paralysis or blind economics, and to facilitate a solution which provides a viable outcome for all stakeholders. We're of the view that DRT can make or can work as a part of a public transport system. That is why we're investing a lot of time, energy and resources in creating the Get There app. Thank you. Don't think there's any questions.